Do you guys think you can write down some instructions and teach me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Yeah.
Step 1, get 2 pieces of bread out. Got it. Get a butter knife and get some PB. Take 1 piece of bread, spread it around with the butter knife.
No, Dad, with the peanut butter.
I'm just doing what it says. It says take 1 piece of bread, spread it around with the butter knife.
Hold on.
Get some jelly, rub it on the other half of the bread.
No, Dad, open the jelly.
It doesn't say to do that. Put the breads together on top of each other. Take a big bite.
So part of the reason I like that one, I want to show it, is because if it's that hard for someone to instruct a human how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, how hard is it to tell a robot the same thing? It's really, really hard. You have to be really, really specific. And the way that we teach robots today, and I'm just going to dive in here because I'm just going to I'm going to trash robots for 10 minutes, and then we'll talk about the career part. And the reason why I trash them, not because I don't like them, not because I don't think they have potential, but because of where we are with them today. So the way we instruct, so robots, of course, there's a mechanical side. I'm sure that lots of you may have dabbled in that kind of thing. You're all very aware of the mechanics of things, and far more aware than I am. But really the heart of them most of the time is going to be the software with which you run it. Yes, you can make things move smoothly. You can create mechanical things. And I keep on talking about mechanicals. I don't really know a lot about engineering. So I'm sure there's lots of other kinds, and you'll correct me. Feel free to just yell at me and say, no, there's a different thing that's going on here. So anyway, hardware, it's hard. Sure, it's difficult. There's lots of materials to consider. There's lots of different things to worry about. But it's really software that's the issue. And part of it is because the way that computers learn and the way that AI learns today is by doing things in an iterative manner, by remembering things, right? It stores information, it pulls it out again, stores information, pulls it out again. And with very, very few, there's some really early work in other areas, but let's remember that computing it's still really all about zeros and ones. Like that's what it is, right? Every single time you are you're instructing your computer, you're starting with zeros and ones. So we learn. So we instruct it to do things. There's lots of different ways to instruct AI. There's lots of instances where you can do unstructured learning, structured learning. But they actually all start in this with the same kind of basis, and they learn it early. And the thing is, that's not actually how we learn. And I'm not sure how many people know or whether you sort of have any background in this, but we don't learn like that. We don't, I mean, yes, we have a place where we store lots of information, but it's actually not the kind of information that you might think. It's not a whole memory. When we come into the world, so when we build robots, right? We build AI, we write programs, write lines and lines and lines of code, and we teach it to write, and we actually teach it to store information effectively. We don't do that. We come into the world with a few things. We come into the world with curiosity. I'm probably going to misspell it. We come in with our senses. And we have a really, really high capability to adapt. And we're super efficient. You probably know that the power required to run your brain is about the same amount of power that it takes to power a light bulb. If I tried to build a robot or a computer that had the same power as my brain, I need enough power to really power a small village at this point in time. That's what we come with. And even when we remember things, and we don't actually remember them, we experience the world through our senses, and our brain takes a record of that experience. And then when I remember something, we actually reconstruct it. Your brain reconstructs it for you out of the experiences that you have had through your senses. So my skin, for example, is one big sensory organ. And when I touch water, I know it's water. But the way that I know it is because I have experienced it before. And when I touch it, there's echoes in my brain of the time that I was in the bathtub as a baby, and the time that I drank some, and the time that I was rained on. At every moment, your brain is adding context, the context of when you had that experience last. And then it's reconstructing it for you, which is super cool and really hard. So it's really, really, really hard. It's really hard for us to do. Does anyone here remember learning how to ride a bike? Kind of, sort of, okay. But it's funny because we don't say, I remember how to ride a bike. Most of the time we say, I know how to ride a bike. How do I know it? I know it because I've experienced it many times. And that experience has been written into the combination of software and hardware that is me. So I'm a combo of software and hardware, right? As we all are. And I can't run my software on any of the others' hardware at this time because it's all bound together. And everything that we do, all of these experiences, every second, there's what my brain is taking in context through our senses. So it's interesting because when we're developing computers, we're sort of trying to get there, but we haven't got the processing power yet. We don't have the actual electrical power. We don't run things fast enough. There's a whole bunch of stuff that actually just isn't there yet. So that's why a lot of the time when robots are in use today, they're used in very structured settings. They're used in industrial settings with very clear rules where we can repeat actions. And that's the same both at a micro and a macro level. So at a macro level, we're talking about companies like robotics that you might know about, which are really an industrial robotics firm here in Calgary. They have a really interesting approach to automation in warehouses, but it's really hard to put the stuff into a home. And the reason for that is because in a home, it's changing all the time. And this is actually the problem with self-driving cars. I know every year, people like self-driving cars, definitely coming next year, 100%, definitely coming next year. And every year that actually doesn't come about. And part of the reason it doesn't come about is because, again, because you'd think, oh, I'm on a road. It's got rules. It's got traffic lights. It's got structure. That's super awesome. But problem is, so we can do probably 80 to 90% of the cases that you experience on a road can be handled by an AI. But if I'm coming to an intersection, and I know I'm a shitty drawer, so if I'm coming to an intersection, right? Wow, that's not a very good intersection, but maybe it even demonstrates the point better. And there's a truck coming this way, and I'm coming this way, and I want to turn, okay? So it's winter because we're in Calgary, so it's winter most of the time. And if there's a truck coming this way, you'd think, okay, great, I can have an AI that actually measures the distance there, figures out how much room do I have, what speed I'm going at, all that kind of stuff. Oh, cool, it might be snowing, we can handle that. What I can't handle yet are these edge cases that occur on an individual basis. So I can't control, and I have no way of knowing whether or not that truck is going to find a little patch of ice and slip and go a tiny bit faster or move. I don't know if I'm going to hit ice. I don't know if a child is playing with something that's going to fly into the road. I don't know if something's going to crash in front of me. There's all of these edge cases that make it really, really, really hard to actually make it possible for what we might call general AI. So I don't know, has anybody watched Star Trek Next Generation? Is it the sort of thing that people watch still? I see lots of people like, no. So, the android in that show, Data, I mean, there are certainly companies reaching towards that kind of thing, having a general AI, but it's very there's just so many edge cases. And because we have the capability to adapt so swiftly, right? There is no other animal on the planet that adapts as swiftly as humans do. And that's why we can live from the North Pole to the South Pole, like in every latitude in between, provided climate change doesn't drive us out of the south. But that's one of the reasons why we're so successful. So robots, oh yeah, that's the thing I was going to say. So robots can be very useful in structured settings at this time. And one of the things that we're doing at Radley Robots is trying to find specific settings where I can get a robot to do one job really well. So tell me, what do you think is perhaps the most successful robotics company around? And I would say it's the only one. Anyone?
Tesla?
Tesla? They're not really. I don't know whether I call them a robotics company, but okay, that's a stab at it. No, not really. So Boston Dynamics actually, so everyone's seen that cool like dancing robot, right? Dancing. Everyone knows that the robot did not decide to get up and dance, right? Every second of that was programmed. Every single second was programming. It was not a decision that a robot made to get up and dance. No, the biggest one, actually, the one that's only really been successful, I think, is Roomba. I'm not kidding. They found a job that people don't really want to do, and they've designed something that's fairly unobtrusive, that people will have in their homes, that they will pay for. Because don't forget, Boston Dynamics gets paid for the IP it produces, but no one's paying very much for its actual robots. I mean, okay, it's a few maybe, military, that kind of stuff, very high-end industrial and military use cases. But the person on the street is not going out and buying a Boston Dynamics robot, generally, because they're pretty darn expensive. Roomba's done a fantastic job of finding something that people don't want to do, that they're willing to pay for. And because they've kept their use case really, really small, is that all it needs to do is drive around, pick stuff up, and then head back to its charging station. Good. And it can, and I haven't actually spent a lot of time watching one, but I think when you watch it sort of go around and figure out, where is stuff, where do I have to move? There's a bit more going on in terms of delivery robots, but interestingly, like people might have heard of delivery robot tests and things like that. Delivery robots are that were being tested in California. People have stopped testing them. And part of the reason they've stopped testing is because they have too many variables, because there's regulation that isn't in place, because sometimes they trick people, because sometimes they can't get over the curb. As soon as you're in the real world, you have real problems. So now that I've trashed them for a little bit, we'll talk about something that is probably a bit more relevant, which is things like RPA. Do we know what RPA is? General nod? Not a general nod? RPA? No? Okay, good. Just want to check. And feel happy to, I'm happy if you just shout out and say, yes, I know what it is. You can move on. So RPA stands for robotic process. Oh, now I've made myself too clean. I can't write. Automation. And what this refers to really are small pieces of code that can automate small events that happen. So things like being able to check on checks, for example. When people submit checks and or they submit payment for invoice and it has to be checked against the original invoice. That sort of checking activity, these repetitive things, RPA handles those things or can handle those things quite well, particularly in companies where they have a lot of legacy systems and they don't really want to invest in updating their systems. They're just like, can't we make what we have work better? Well, you can, and you can use RPA to do that. So are there people here who think that they're going to lose a job to technology? Probably not, because you're engineers. So, someone's got to make this stuff, right? So you may not lose your job, but there are people who will. So the World Economic Forum issued a report in 2020, which was that by 2025, 85 million jobs will be lost because of automation in the workplace. But 97 million jobs will also be created because of automation. But of course, they're going to be different jobs. And so part of what the move towards automation in lots of different areas means is that it's going to be much, much harder to get a reasonable paying job if you only have high school education. It's unfortunate, right? Alberta is actually a real, this I think used to be probably a wonderful place for someone who could come out of high school, go to work in the oil fields, make $120,000 a year, awesome. When $120,000 a year like bought you a house, which it probably doesn't now. But anyway, so at the one time, people could do that, and it's becoming more and more difficult to do that because robots and robotic automation can take the place of that repetitive work, warehouse work, some stuff in stores, stacking shelves, stuff like that. I mean, I myself have been put out of work by the move to technology. So my first job when I came out of high school, I went and I worked at the RBC Gold Tower in Toronto. And I worked in an environment that no longer exists, which was called the securities cage. So people are familiar with stocks and bonds, you know, you buy them, you sell them. These days you do it all online. So at one point in time, and this would have been in the late 80s, all that happened was like someone would say, okay, I want to buy some stock in whatever. That stock is currently held at in the RBC securities cage. And they put in an order, and we get the order via telex of all things. And then we go find the stocks and we put them in a bag, and then we give them to a messenger, and the messenger would run them over to TD or wherever they had to go to. And they ran them back. So this was a full cage. I received the telexes through a pneumatic tube system. And I think a lot of people don't know what that is. And if you're curious, you can look it up. It's spelled PNEUMATIC. It's a pneumatic tube system. It's pretty old school, and things would really come from another floor down to us, and we'd open it up and look at the order, and then we'd give the orders to the messenger. You think of it as private point-to-point physical email, I think, that went along a very particular structure inside the bank. I'm sure it's been completely replaced by now. But of course, so nowadays, stocks and bonds don't actually go anywhere. You know that, right? Like when you buy them, they don't go anywhere. If you buy them in the US, there's the DTCC. That's actually where they all are. They never move. Don't go anybody unless you're investing in private companies type of thing. You actually get a stock certificate. They don't go anywhere. Just the name, the title changes as things go back and forth. So that's one thing. But the good thing for you guys about new jobs coming on the market is that they're brand new. No one's ever done them. So that means there's no seniority. There's no way for someone to say, well, you can't do that because you haven't done it for 20 years. And like, well, it hasn't been around for 20 years. In fact, it hasn't been around for 5 years. So you can't actually ask for tons of experience in a particular area. I just want to make sure I get this off. So the things to think about then, if you're thinking about sort of navigating stuff, the things to think about are things like, what new roles can you see like are in my area or things that I'm interested in? What new skills do I need to learn? Just keeping an eye on time. And what else have I got? So nowadays, if I am, and I'm going to fall back on construction because I have done some stuff with construction software. So at one point in time, if I was a construction manager or a civil engineer, I'd be dealing a lot with big pieces of paper. I'd be doing physical drawings. Now, of course, I have to do stuff online. And I do a lot more online renders, or I do computer renders of what I'm going to build. And there's lots and lots of skills that are involved in that are not purely engineering skills. So I don't know, I mean, has anyone seen like new roles in areas that you might be studying? No? Everyone's just seeing, yeah, go ahead.
Maintenance of robots or other systems?
Yeah, maintenance of systems for sure. What about things like, so things like even if you're doing sort of geology or anything like that, or I was thinking of other. I looked at one thing, which was talking about being a cartographer and being like like looking at geographies and all the different systems you now have to take information in from. One of the big changes I think in like generally is that now we have to talk about all the time. We have to talk about data. We have to talk about the data that we create, the data that we have. How are we going to make money out of it? How can we use that data to provide better results? But I'm just going to leave that there and we'll talk a little bit and think about that maybe a little bit, like what new roles you might see, what new skills you might need to have. And what I want to do is talk just a little bit about why, I mean, the entrepreneurial mindset. I had to look it up. I didn't really know what it was. So I thought the entrepreneur, have you guys, has that been something that's been talked about? The entrepreneurial mindset, why you should be an entrepreneur, that type of thing. Does anyone know what I mean? I see a lot of blank faces, but that's, you know, because you're wearing masks. But, but I guess the question is, why do you think you would need to think about yourself as an entrepreneur when you're an engineer? Any guesses? No?
Because engineers are people who create things.
Well, I guess first of all, like I say, what do you think an entrepreneur is? What's an entrepreneur? Yeah. Okay. Okay, this one. Sure. Sure. Someone who has, yeah, okay, that's not bad. It's actually not bad at all. But the way that I would phrase it is actually, I would say, so I mean, it's easy to say, well, an entrepreneur, like, it's not somebody who has a good idea. And it's not somebody who just kind of acts like a dick because they've had a good idea. There's a lot of that around. What it is, the way I think of it is I think that like people who are thinking entrepreneurially all the time are thinking, how can I make this better? Not perfect, not the end of it, because the how is really important. How can I do this? I'm only going to know how I can do this when I know how it works today. And do you think that engineering is still, and I'm honest question here, do you think a lot of engineering now is still kind of rooted in the physical world? Or do you think it's mostly not? Anyone? I see a head shake. Well, certainly software engineering, for sure. Are there a lot of software engineers in the house? Hand up. So some. Are there civil engineers? Mechanical engineers? Okay, all right. So you're still working, so there are some people here who are still working in the physical world, even though you might be using the tools that are one step removed. And the reason I'm talking about this is because this how has become, how do I make things better, has actually become, I think, a more difficult thing to do because we all now are living in a layer of abstraction away from the physical world, right? When I used to go to the bank, or if I needed money, I would physically get up, I would go to the bank, and I know what a road is. Again, I don't know why I keep talking about roads, but anyway, because they're really obvious. I know what it is, I know what it's made of, I know when I get to the bank, there's a lock. I have a pretty good idea of how a lock works. I know that there's cash in it, I know I can talk to a real person, I know I can get real money. That whole process now exists on another plane as something we've essentially kind of imagined. We kind of live in an imaginary world that is propped up by the software that we create. And if we don't know how some of that works, then it's going to be really hard for us to say, how can we make it better? This is not to suggest that everybody needs to go and become a software developer. It's not that at all. I think it's really useful to know some things about how things are put together and how information travels these days. But you don't need to be a programmer to understand that. You don't need to know that. I am not a programmer. I have a very good grasp of the concepts. I know, and I understand a lot about how to make certain things better or how I would do that. And I would say that having this mindset, which is kind of how I boil it all down to, can help you no matter where you are. So when you go to any kind of new role or anything like that, how I make things better is really driven by a couple of things. It is driven by curiosity. That's one, right? What is it? It's driven by what I see and hear. It's driven by my senses. And because we're so good at adapting, I can not only can I think about how to make it better, I can imagine what it's going to look like when it is better. And part of what powers that is this skill in adaptation. So if I go back to, actually, the other thing I would say is that making things, there's two parts to this. One is, how can I make this better? And the other thing that perhaps people don't think about enough is, why should I make it better? A robot and an AI is not in a condition today, and may not be for a long time, to be able to say why is something a good idea. Has anyone come across an instance where Google actually comes up with a good question? No. I mean, if I said to Google, what's a good question? I don't know. Like, I haven't come across a lot of AI computers who are good at coming up with good questions and asking, because really that's how we learn, how we make things better, is by asking good questions. So we think about this kind of thing. We think about, how can I make things better? And I think about what new roles are in an area and what new skills I need to create, or I need to get. And don't be like put up. I mean, I know you're just like probably leaving school and you're thinking, really, do I have to learn something again? But fortunately, skills and sort of short courses that you can do on the web now are really, really available. I actually started coding like 2 months ago, which I've never done, but well, kind of done a bit, but I thought, sure, let's give it a go. Because how hard can it be? It's not that bad. So it's always a good idea to think, okay, what are the new skills? What are the little skills? Can I learn a little bit about how data is pulled together and managed? Can I learn a little bit about how new processes might work in a new role? And then this what else I think is really important, because it's what else have you got that you bring to the table? Whether that's things that you've done in sport, things that you've done, instances where you've shown leadership in a particular area. I can tell you what I bring here today. So I did tons of stuff in theater and bands and whatnot. And at the time, of course, I was thinking, well, I'm never going to use that again. But surprisingly, it comes in very, very handy, because it means that I feel perfectly okay instead of rambling for an hour in front of you guys. These skills, though, the sort of the main skill that you bring, actually, that's it. The main skill that you bring is this curiosity and adaptability, and what you experience. It's actually, the more human we are, the more capable we are of surviving in an age of automation and robotics. We are the only beings who are going to say, why is something a good idea? You know, no one necessarily asked the question, is social media really a good idea? What are the negative things as well as the positive things? Because, you know, it's kind of ended up being a place where people get bullied and made to feel like shit about themselves. And I don't think that was the aim when somebody started, but that's where we've kind of gotten to, because perhaps we didn't ask, why are we doing this? Is it something we really need? I was approached, so when I started doing some robotic stuff, I had a chat with an investor who had said to me, we had this long chat about what I want us to do. And he's like, I'll tell you what, he says, what about sex robots? He said, we could do a sex robot brothel. And I was like, okay. And I thought, well, there's money in it. I'm sure of that. There's definitely money in it. There actually was one that opened on the outskirts of Toronto at one point, sex robot brothel. And I thought about it for quite a long time. I got back to him and I said, you know what? I don't think I want to do that, because A, it makes me feel a little bit dirty. And B, I don't think it's a good idea for us to create humanoid forms and then make it possible for someone to do whatever they want with no accountability towards something that looks like a human. I thought, I don't actually think that's a good idea. So I don't want to be a part of that. And I know people are doing it, like they are doing it. They're gonna make them because we're humans and we think, oh, that's a good idea. Let's just make whatever. But I would actually say that one of the chief things that we should be thinking about is why are we doing this and what are the impacts and is it really a good idea to do some of this stuff? So I know we're kind of almost at the end of time. And I would say, yeah, this what else we bring, as I say, the more you can be like a human, and why by like a human, I mean, the more you can care, because robots do not and will not care. And what's astounding is when you put robots into people's homes, how quickly they think robots care about them. How quickly they miss them when you take them away. If you're a robot toy and you take it away from people, like, oh man, I love my Jibo. He was so cute to me. He loved me. And I think, no, he wasn't. People name their Roombas. They think of their Roomba as a pet. It is not a pet, and it doesn't give a shit about you. So, really, just humans care. Humans are curious. And humans can think and humans can question, right? If I assign an AI a task, which is to sharpen a knife, and I say, I want you to get better at sharpening a knife all the time. It has the same knife. Eventually, it will sharpen it until it has worn the knife away. Because the only instruction it understands is keep sharpening, keep sharpening, keep sharpening, get better, 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 better. But there's no judgment there. It's humans that add judgment, that allow you to question. Robots and RPA, they do not relate. They really don't. You see stuff on YouTube and all the rest of it, totally isn't. They absolutely are not relating to anybody. And I would just, and have lots of experiences which provide you with context. Because the more context you have, and the more experience you have, the more adaptable you are going to be. The more situations you put yourself in, the more quickly you will be like, oh, I haven't done this before, but I did do it earlier, or I did something like it, so I probably can do that now. I'm just gonna take a straw poll. We have like 5 and stuff. Can anyone tell me, I'll tell you what, are you guys, how old are you, like 22-ish? No. 1920, okay, all right. Okay, hands up, who has had more than 5 jobs? It's okay. You've had more than 5 jobs. Well done. Who's had more than 3 jobs? Okay, not bad. All right. Were they all different kinds of jobs? Okay, that's good. So I would say by the time I was thinking about it, and I thought, by the time I was 20, I had probably had 1, 2, 3. So let's see, I worked in a fish and chip store. I did newspapers. I worked in a gas station. I worked at Sears during the Christmas season, which was really in the toy department, where people would just come and drop their kids off and walk off. It was awesome. I taught swimming. I taught karate. I think I'd probably done like 7 or 8 jobs by the time I was around 20. Not because I was desperately seeking new experiences, but because I really wanted to make some money and I really wanted to be out of the house and doing lots of different things. And so I think as a consequence then, it's been much more possible for me to adapt, in spite of the fact, as I shared with Kachikaya, sorry, as I shared with her before, so I didn't go to university. So I'm like the weird outlier that didn't go to university, but still managed to have a job. But I think the reason for that is because I am very, very curious about things. And I had a lot of history in the downtown. And I asked why a lot. So if anyone's got questions and wants to talk about anything, we got like 3 minutes before you're supposed to go, but I hope this has been interesting for you. It seemed like nobody fell asleep, so awesome. And thank you very much for your attention.